This class. Good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers before our Saturday class. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Tatsavitra Varenyam, Vargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Mritam Gamya. ओम सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सवीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति 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 ओम. Let's open our Yog Darshan scripture, second chapter, and the title of this chapter is Sadhana Pad. Sadhana, so important for a sadhak to do the sadhana and reach towards the sadhya, the goal. And last week we saw Rishi Patanjali told us very clearly, in order to remove these obstacles, which are called kleshas or afflictions on the path of sadhana, we need to meditate. Dhyan hai tad vrityah. So all these can be destroyed with the help of meditation. So it's not just a meditation over the weekend or during your retreat going somewhere. It's a lifelong meditation that will keep on cleaning our mind, keep on getting rid of all these afflictions. Now let's start today's class. The verse number 12. In verse number 12, Rishi Patanjali is giving us the anatomy of karma. This is a karma yoni we live in as human beings. Everything is dependent upon our karmas, current karmas, past karmas. And still there are a lot of storehouse of karmas too. Some good karam, some not so good karam. We have the freedom to do them. Every given time we have the freedom to do this or that. But we don't have the freedom to choose the fruit. Fruit is given to us according to the law of God. That's why we say he is the giver of the fruit, but according to the law, he has established for all of us. So let's look at in this verse what is Rishi Patanjali saying. Klesh mulaha karmashya drishtaha adrishtaha janam vedniya. So klesh is those five-fold afflictions which we have memorized very beautifully. Avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh. Those are the kleshas. Mool is the root, foundation. So klesh, mool together means the one which has its roots in the kleshas. Or in other way, we can understand that which is the ground or the source of the kleshas. What is that? Karmashya. Again, this is a compound word, karam and ashya. Karam means the actions or the subtle impressions of the actions, and ashya means the resting ground, container, sac, organ. That's a ashya. So the container of karmas, the reservoir of karmas. Drashtaha. That means visible, seen or present, drashtaha. Adrishtaha, unseen. That means invisible or future. So drishtaha, adrishtaha. Janam means birth, vedaniya, to be experienced. So drishtaha, adrishtaha, janam vedaniya means that which we experience in our seen and unseen lives. Or that which is a matter of experience in our current life and also in the lives to come, the future lives. So the karmic phenomena is rooted in afflictions. And this phenomena is what we experience in our current and future lives. So this is the direct definition or the translation of this verse. Or you can understand it, the reservoir of karma is rooted in afflictions and is to be experienced in seen and unseen lives. So this sutra is the backbone of the law of karma and also the incarnation. It answers key questions which we have most of the time. How do we create karmas? How are karmas stored? How do karma receive their nourishment? How do they become active? Why do some karma seem to never bear fruit while others bear fruit instantly? Why do some people seem lucky and others seem trapped by inescapable misfortunes? So this particular sutra, sutra number 12, tells us what we can do to change our karmic field. How we can modify our present and future conditions by transforming or nullifying our previous deeds, and ultimately how we can attain freedom from the bondage of karmas in this lifetime. So all those questions are answered if we understand this verse, number 12. The central word in this sutra is karmasya. This really takes us to the core of yoga science and philosophy. I told you that this is a composite word, karam and ashya. Karam means action, and that really refers to this inevitable law of cause and effect. That means do good, reap good. Do bad, reap bad. That is the law. And at a deeper level, karam refers to the subtle effects of our actions. Because every action leaves an impression in our memory. And the repeated actions reinforce these impressions. And eventually they turn into strong habit patterns. Anything we repeat, it becomes habits. And habits, when they mature, they become an integral part of our vast unconscious mind. And the strong habits, they become the building blocks of our personality. They define our being. So that was all about the karma. And the ashya, ashya means pouch, sack, container, or box. or any kind of entity which has the capacity to contain something. Ashya. So karmashya is the pouch that contains our karma. See, just like a pitashya, if you are familiar with that word, gallbladder is called pitashya, pouch of the pit or the bile, pitashya. Amashya, what is amashya? Amashya is the stomach, the pouch of undigested food. Amashya. And what is a pakvashya? Intestines are called pakvashya, the pouch of digested food. And there are other similar words in our body, like a malashya. What is a malashya? Colon. Mal is the waste matter. So waste matter is stored there. And the bladder, what is called in Sanskrit bladder? Mutrashya. Okay. So just to make it clear what this ashya means, just remember this is a pouch that stores something. And karmashya is the where our karmas are stored. According to Yoga Shastra, that means the science of yoga, this pouch is made of the mind. So in other words, mind is the karmashya. But remember, bile is a physical substance. So is the pouch that contains it. The same way karam is subtle, so is the pouch then that contains it. But this analogy raises another question. The gallbladder contains bile, but it's not the source of bile. We all know the bile is manufactured in the liver. A basic metabolic process governs how much bile is manufactured, the rate at which it is funneled into the gallbladder, and at what rate it is discharged into the small intestine. Same way, the functioning of our karmashya is governed by the forces of time, space, and causation. Propelled by these forces, mind discharges karmas into the domain of Prakriti and Purusha. And these same forces bring matter, consciousness, and karma together. And what is this called? A destiny. And the birth is the end result. This mind of ours is so vast. It has a number of functions. The aspect of the mind that functions as the karmashya, the storehouse of karma, is called chitta. Okay. So mind is a general term. Then part of the mind is called a chitta, which is a storehouse. And chitta karmashya is guided and governed by the forces of time, space, and causation. See, just as the gallbladder is connected to the liver, our karmashya is connected to the field of afflictions, kleshas, avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, abhinivesh. And as this analogy makes clear our karmas are manufactured in the field of afflictions. From this field, they flow into our karmashya. And from there, guided by the forces of time, space, causation, they find their way into the domain of matter and consciousness. So this is the whole process. And for all intents and purposes, our karmashya receives the nurturance from the field of afflictions. The more active this field, more karmas are manufactured. And the bigger the stockpile of karma in the karmashya, the greater the urge to discharge them into the domain of matter and consciousness. And this is what really forces us to rush towards the sansar, the cycle of birth and death. The afflictions or the kleshas are one of the most important topics in Yoga Sutras. That's why we have taken a long time to understand each and every klesha. So klesh is a technical term, but in general it refers to the source of all pains and miseries. This klesh word is a very common Hindi word also, and klesh automatically means sorrow, affliction. But in its strictest sense, the yogic concept of klesh refers to avidya, because that's where it starts, from the ignorance. So avidya has a more precise meaning. That's why Rishi Patanjali describes avidya as a lack of knowledge. That's what we saw in this chapter. Misunderstanding, distorted understanding, confusion regarding our true self. So avidya is the main affliction, or you can call it a mother of the rest of the afflictions. So avidya, a subtle and unimaginable, potent affliction, causes turmoil in our inner consciousness. Although this turmoil can be hard to detect, but our distorted self-image, asmita, attachment, which is rag, aversion, which is dvesh, or fear of death, abhinivesh, they all arise from it. That's why I was saying it's a mother of the rest of the afflictions. So avidya and these other four kleshas constitute the total range of afflictions, and they are the manufacturing plant of our karmas. Remember that. If you want to know why we end up doing certain things, dig deeper into your mind. So karmashya is the warehouse. The qualities of our karma depend on the attributes and characteristics of the afflictions, and depending on these attributes and characteristics, we create two types of karma, like a two different category, or two types of, it almost gives a two types of karmashya, virtuous and non-virtuous. The denser the field of avidya, the more confused and deluded our asmita, and denser our avidya, and the more deluded our asmita, the more disruptive the forces of attachments, aversion, and fear of death. These disruptive forces create an environment of desires, greed, anger, and hatred. So the karmas manufactured in this environment are inevitably negative and destructive. And obeying the laws of time, space, and causation, these negative and destructive karmas, they will flow into our karmashya. And a karmashya dominated by such negative karma is called apunya karmashya, non-virtuous. So this kind of a house has the non-virtuous karmas. But on the other hand, the more enlightened the field of avidya, the less deluded the asmita, less potent the forces of attachment, aversion, and fear of death. This will help create an environment relatively free from desire, greed, anger, and hatred. And the karmas manufactured in this environment are positive, constructive. They are flavored with dispassion, contentment, love, and compassion. And karma flowing from this relatively enlightened field of avidya are also stored in the karmashya. And the presence of these karmas give rise to a punya karmashya. That means a karmashya that houses virtuous karmas. So this is not to say that we create two separate karmashyas. We have one vast mind field. And that's where we are storing all kinds of karma from time immemorial. We are the one who stored them there. These are our karma. And our good and bad karma, they cluster together in our mind field. So all of us have both good karma and bad karma, which are dependent on the quality of our field of avidya. Our mind, which is the storehouse of these karmas, is constantly under the influence of our karmic properties. And seated deep in our mind, the subtle forces of our karmas influence our thought, speech, and action. Because outwardly, we see the effect of all this. Actions also, thoughts also, speech also. Just as our present is the result of our past, so our future will be the result of our present. It's all connected. And the goal of yoga sadhana is to bring a qualitative change in the field of afflictions, kleshas, by minimizing the grip of ignorance, elevating our self-understanding, and eventually freeing ourselves from the binding forces of attachment, aversion, fear, desire, anger, and greed. So the sadhana that transforms and purifies the field of affliction will bring the necessary changes and will be drawn towards doing good, positive, constructive actions. So you can see that at the time of we are doing the actions, lot has happened way before that. That's why the sadhana needs to be done. Not at the level of action, because once the action is performed, the fruit will be there. If I have a pile of wood and I make arrows with it and I start shooting the arrows, that is the time of the action. Whether that action kills a cow or a human being or hurt even a tree, action has been performed. Or when we speak words, and actions are not only with the words and the body, actions are done with the thoughts also. Blessing somebody or cursing somebody. Having ill feeling or having compassionate feelings. Those are all actions. And they are our actions. Because positive, constructive actions will result in good karma. And they will be deposited in our mind field. And conforming to the laws of time, space, and causation, these karams will they will form a punya karmasya, and mind filled with virtuous, auspicious, and enlightening karam. Eventually, the forces of time, space, and causation will spin our karmic wheel in the direction wherein lies the highest good. And what is the highest good? Freedom from the bondage of the karam. That is the goal. We don't do good karam just to keep on adding more good karmas. Good karams are done so that we can get out of this wheel of birth and death. Highest state. Next sutra addresses what happens if our karmas and the mind that houses them remain rooted in the dark, dense field of avidya. That is verse number 13. Sati mulehe tad vipakaha jati ayu bhogaha. Sati. Sati means in the presence of or under the prevailing conditions. Sati. Mulehe. Mool is the root or the cause. Tad means that. And over here, he is referring to karmasya, because that is the topic over here, the field of karmas. Vipakaha. Vipaka is post-digestion, or the fruits, or the condition of bearing fruit. Vipakaha. Jati, to be born, to be in a body, to be born in a particular species. Jati. That's why we call it human jati, manushya jati. Okay? Ayu, lifespan, the length of time, or to remain connected with the body. Ayu. Bhogaha, experience. That means the experience of pain or pleasure. Consuming the fruits of karmas. So together this verse means as long as the root continues to exist, that karmasya, the field of our action, must have an effect, forcing us to be born into a particular species, live for a particular span of time, and undergo inescapable experiences of pleasure and pain. So as long as the root continues to exist, mule. We've been talking about that our lives are shaped by our actions. Our pleasure and pain, success and failure, our gain and loss, they're all results of our actions. Where and how we are born and the circumstances that walk into our lives are determined by our own karma. And actions are of two kinds. Those we performed in the past, and also those which we are performing now. So past and the current. And the past actions are further twofold. Those we performed a long time ago, and we have forgotten. And those we still remember. We have little control over the results of these past actions. You all remember that story of blind king Dhritarashtra? He was very powerful, physically also very powerful. He had a lot of knowledge also, because his own father was Rishi Vyasa. From that kind of a Rishi, you can imagine what kind of a son was born. But he was blind. One time when he was in the company of his father, he asked him, "You gave me birth. I'm born into this highest kingly family. How come I'm blind?" Rishi Vyas, he had the power to grace a person. So just like he graced Sanjay also to be able to look for, hear for, all those siddhis he could give. So he told Dhritarashtra, "Sit down and go back. I'm giving you this power to go back and look at your past lives." And Dhritarashtra went back several lives. Several lives. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how many, but quite a few lives. And he came back. He said, "I have not done anything wrong. I don't remember hurting anybody. That I am born blind in this lifetime." Rishi Vyas said, "Just go back one more life." In that life, he saw that he was hurting a little bug with a pointed thorn in the eyes. That action. He was born blind. So we don't even know how many actions, because sometimes when something bad comes to us, we want to know why. I've been so good. Why the bad things are happening to me only? That is the time to remember this truth. This law is very just. There's no injustice in God's laws. Out of our own ignorance, we just don't understand it. We have to have a faith. My own Guruji used to say, very simple term. He says, whenever something bad happens, kritam smar. That's a little saying from the Vedas, kritam smar. You must have done something. You don't know right now, but remember, you must have done something at that time somewhere. Take the responsibility of your own actions. Kritam smar. And this is what Rishi Patanjali is saying, that past actions are also twofold. Those we performed a long time ago and we have forgotten, and those we still remember. And we have little control over the results of these past actions. If the arrow has been shot, it has been shot. You don't have control over it. But before you shoot the arrow, you can burn the wood to cook something or give it away to somebody that would to make chairs or tables. There's always other actions which can be done. These results are totally in the hands of an unseen force. Fruit giver is him. Normally we call him nature, providence, or even destiny. These are the common terms we use. Our current actions are somewhat under our control. But at the same time, they are heavily influenced by our past actions. How our past and present actions are propelled by the fivefold forces of afflictions, how they are stored in our karmasya, how the force of providence arranges circumstances for actions to play themselves. We have already seen that in the previous verse. I was telling you when I was going through the little life story of Rishi Vyas. And I was telling you that Rishi Vyas, he has written the commentaries on Patanjali Sutras. And according to sage Vyas, entire range of our actions can be divided into two major categories. One leading to the formation of a punya karmasya, and the other leading to the formation of a papa karmasya. Punya karmasya is the mind field where the impressions of our virtuous deeds are stored. And the pap karmasya is the mind field where the impressions of our non-meritorious deeds are stored. So actions themselves originate in a much more subtle and potent realm. The fivefold afflictions. And the more our actions are propelled by these five afflictions, ignorance, egoism, attachment, aversion, and fear, the more they are tainted. Following the law, and what is the law? Similar attracts similar. These tainted actions, they just become together in our mind field to form a pap karmasya. And at the same time, the virtuous actions, they also cluster together to form a punya karmasya. But majority of our actions are neither supremely good nor terribly bad. Most are accompanied by a mixture of likes and dislikes, confidence and doubt, clarity and confusion. These opposing attributes weaken each other, making our actions mildly positive or negative, mildly good or bad. And when such mild actions mature, bear fruit, then you can imagine that their influence in our present action is also mild. But at the same time, actions performed under the influence of intense ignorance, intense egoism, intense attachment, intense aversion, and intense fear, you will have an intense karmic consequence. And the same way, actions performed under the influence of intense wisdom, intense surrender, intense non-attachment, intense love, and intense trust, they will give the intense positive karmic consequence. So we have to bring the intensity when we do something good, because we want to increase our punya karmasya. These intense consequences, good or bad, walk into our lives with so much force that we cannot escape. And this is what's known as act of destiny. Some actions are so significant, so powerful, they form their own independent karmasya. And they mature very quickly. They march into our lives like a storm. They even alter our path. That's how we see certain examples. A person totally materialistic all of a sudden becomes a saint, came into the company of some very powerful guru. These powerful karmic consequences create a turning point in our lives. This is almost like a phenomena of overnight transformation, which is associated with the karma. If our actions are inherently negative, destructive, demeritorious, they form a pap karmasya. If they are inherently positive, constructive, virtuous, they form a punya karmasya. And when they mature, their dormant potentials are awakened. They become active with virtually no instigating causes. And unlike our normal actions, these distinctive actions transcend the laws of time and space and even principle of causation. These distinctive actions bear fruits no matter what. They walk into our lives no matter what. In other words, the karmic consequences of these actions take precedence over all others. And what are these actions? Like a negative actions that mature immediately are torturing those who are suffering. Somebody is suffering from intense pain, fear, disease. You torture them. Forcing miseries to part with their money, deceiving those who have placed their complete trust in you, harming saintly souls who live a life of purity, austerity, simplicity, selfless service. These are intense negative karmas. And there are positive actions also which mature immediately, like a meditation on a mantra, practice of austerity, staying in samadhi, surrender to God, wholeheartedly worshipping, offering your service to a Maharishi. The more intensely and earnestly these actions are performed, the more potent they are. They bear fruit without fail. And we see the effect of this quickly. So here in this sutra, Patanjali returned to the central theme of karmasya. With the word in this sutra, sati. So Rishi Patanjali is reiterating the previous sutra, reminding us that even though actions are housed in the realm of mind, they are born and nurtured in the realm of the five-fold afflictions. And as long as the karma and their karmasya remain connected to their root, there is no hope of freedom from the bondage of karma. Sooner or later, the doer must face his deeds. And this is the inevitable law of karma. We'll continue from this because there's a little bit more I need to talk about on this sutra. Okay, and then we'll move forward from here next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much for joining.